Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the welcome, and I want to thank USEA especially. And I find myself, I've been listening in and just nodding with so many of the nice, warm comments that people have made about Barry. It's truly going to be missed. But my hat's off to the USEA team on conducting this year's forum. It's tricky, new format, but really well done. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. I want to go quick. I have a lot of slides. I want to show you more than I want to tell you. And we'll go quick and hopefully get to some questions. So AFPM, I'm going to tell you a little bit about AFPM, and then we're going to talk about what the last year looked like and what a recovery looks like. And then we'll talk about a longer term projections and talking about working with this new administration in Washington. So AFPM, we've been around since 1902. I've been around a while. We represent the vast majority of the refining and petrochemical industry in the United States. You see here the map with facilities, certainly in Texas, Louisiana, California, but really all over. And of course, also part of our membership are the companies that provide support to refining and petrochemicals. So in looking at 2020, obviously the biggest impact from COVID-19 was the lives lost and our lives that changed so dramatically. But I wanted to also just go through some of the business impacts on our sector as well. If you look at gasoline and jet fuel, these two graphs on the page, you see that the demand destruction was deep and it was very fast. And so you see these graphs have a zero on the y-axis there, and that's unusual in our industry. You see the variation in gasoline on the left there. It's usually within a band, but you can see that sharp decline there in April 2020. Gasoline dropped 50%, distillate or diesel dropped 18%, and then jet fuel dropped over 70%. This has led to contraction in the refining industry. We've had 6 refineries closed or idled, some of those being repurposed for other fuels, but certainly a big impact on our industry. So how did our industries react to this COVID-19 crisis? Well, number one, we maintained our ongoing operations. And this involved our companies making sure that they had appropriate safety protocols, certainly sequestering and trying to isolate teams so that if there was a COVID illness, that would be contained and you'd be able to continue to operate. We, of course, wrote a letter to the governors, as I know many of my other colleagues did as well, talking about how the industry is critical. We were designated as critical across the country, of course. Because of that sudden demand drop I showed you in the last slide, we also asked the EPA to ease the RVP fuel waivers. And that's because you had a lot of the winter gasoline in the tanks that wasn't needed because of the sharp demand decline. And so we needed some more time to switch over to the summer blend. And we were very happy to see that. And hats off to the Trump administration, both in that crisis and with the unprecedented hurricane season we've had over the last few years. The administration was very, very good to work with and very on top of things. And then the other thing that was a little bit unexpected and not directly related to COVID was a discussion about how America supplies our refineries with crude oil. There was a very dramatic drop in the price of oil, and there were calls from some to restrict imports from Saudi Arabia, who had in some ways started that process by announcing that they were going to increase production even in a time of lower demand. We were able to explain how that would have been counterproductive. It would have only hurt American manufacturing, and thankfully some good diplomacy there caused folks to walk back from the cliff. As part of the pandemic, of course, particularly on the petrochemical side, we're very proud of the role that our companies have played. On refining, we, of course, continue to deliver fuels that allowed deliveries. I know many of us switched over to getting our food, for example, delivered from home, but you still got to have fuel in the tank to do that. Frontline PPEs, you see the graphic here on the left with the mask and the 3 petrochemicals that go as part of that product, gowns and other products as well. And there were 2 companies that I would highlight for you that switched over production. For Dow Chemical, they switched 5 plants to working on hand sanitizer. And they're estimating they're going to have about 880,000 8-ounce bottles of hand sanitizer that they were able to donate to the local healthcare systems and government agencies. And there was an excellent producer in the Northeast, Braskem, that in the early days of the pandemic we knew a little bit less about the disease, but we knew we were going to need all of the things like gowns and the other PPE to fight it. And Braskem, in a very innovative way, switched to 12-hour shifts, and they had the two shifts living on site and then switching off with each other, and limited exposure. And that's just the kind of sacrifice that speaks to the can-do attitude of folks in the petrochemical industry. So moving on to powering the recovery here, if you look at the economic projections, we're all expecting a growing economy, and of course it's going to be powered in large part by oil and petroleum products. And a couple of facts that I just wanted to point out to you is we just ran the numbers again. Each job in a refining industry supports 32 jobs, 16 direct, 16 induced. Those are the kind of core manufacturing jobs that can really continue to make this economy strong. In addition, you see on the right-hand side, these are really good jobs. This comes from our annual report, where the average refining industry worker total comp is around 225,000. Average petrochemical industry comp is about 149,000, and that compares to the average U.S. worker at 63,000. So we're really proud of the high-paying, good jobs that we provide in our facilities, and also the folks that come to our facilities to help. So in the turnaround season especially, we have a lot of folks from the building trades. You see on the left-hand part of your screen there, a report from North America's building trades unions. They wanted to look at jobs in oil and natural gas compared to the renewables industry. And I'm very pleased to report that jobs in our industry were much better across the board, and including in the viewpoint of the membership of NABTU. So I just say, I know John Kerry got a little bit of press saying that he thinks oil and gas workers could go and make solar panels, but if you can believe this study, and I know you can, I think the union construction workers would say, thanks, I think we'll stick with our oil and gas jobs. If we look at 2021 and beyond, we're looking at a demand rebound, and that's good news. IEA, EIA, many analysts share that prediction. Turner Mason, highly regarded, saying that they're expecting to see the new normal resemble the old normal. And IEA says that they expect diesel and gasoline to return to 99% of pre-pandemic levels. So I think the future is bright on the refining side. And then, of course, petrochemical demand has in many ways already returned, more than recovered for ethylene and polypropylene and ethylene demand as well. This chart just shows you what some of the major analytical firms are expecting over the next few years, and you can see it's a return to the pre-pandemic levels after a year or two of lower demand globally. Here, now I want to shift gears a little bit to the long-term outlook, and this is a fun graph that shows you long-term global demand. These are in million barrels per day. And you see from 2050 that it goes all the way from the lowest at 30 all the way up to about 120. And the 30 is simply, that's BP saying this is kind of what it would look like if we really did have net zero. And so that's a wide range there. So that's not really a prediction of what it's going to look like. It's more like this is the bottom of the realm of what people are talking about. But the pace of transition to other fuels is certainly hotly debated. And that's what I want to get to next. Electrification. It's a topic we've heard about even today from other presenters, one saying he saw a stampede toward EVs. So I thought it might be good for us to look at both sides of that question. So is this the year of the EV? Market capitalization might tell you that. If you were to look at the market, you see on the left-hand side here, Motley Fool put together a graphic that showed the market capitalization per car sold. And you have Tesla on the left-hand side with about 1.4 million per car. And then you have the rest of the automakers on this graph between $6,000 and $20,000. So that just shows you a little bit of a discrepancy there, or a little bit of a difference in how companies are valued. As one example, Tesla's about 5.5 times bigger than Ford, GM, and Fiat Chrysler combined, and bigger than the rest of the auto industry. A lot of people are speculating that perhaps it's overvalued. I won't venture into those territories, particularly with everything we see happening over the last few days with GameStop and some of these other wild price swings. But I would note it's kind of interesting that Elon Musk himself tweeted out that he thought the price of the stock was too high on May 1st, 2020, when it was at about $150, and it's at $800 now. So is 2021 the year of the EV? Well, let's see. Maybe 2020 was the year of the EV, or 2019, or maybe it was 2018, or maybe it was 2017, or another recent headline says, no, it's actually going to be 2023. So as we continue to look for the year of the EV, let's look at the other side of the coin. Battery electric vehicles are still less than 2% of sales in the United States. So a car with an internal combustion engine is 98% plus of the sales. In fact, sales of EVs in the United States have actually declined the last 2 years. There's a lot of reasons for that. And I want to just say here that AFPM is not against electric vehicles. We think that everyone should be able to compete for consumers. That's what we're asking to be able to continue to do, to be able to continue to operate and supply fuel for consumers who prefer a gasoline or diesel engine. But one of the things I found really interesting was a report done for the Department of Transportation by Strategic Vision, and you see that chart here on the page. And what this shows is what people actually bought, and this is only looking at folks who bought a battery electric vehicle. And so for the most part, these are folks who want to be on the cutting edge and we're enthusiastic about their purchase. And we're willing to take perhaps a bit of a risk since it's a new product line, at least in recent history. So only about 54% of battery electric owners decide to buy a battery electric car for their next purchase. And that's very interesting. And then for plug-in hybrid and hybrid, you also see a big reversion back to the gasoline cars. So this has been one of our clarion calls, is that we shouldn't force electrification on people. We should give people options so that they can decide what they want to purchase themselves and not go the way of, for example, California, which is pushing for 100% EV mandate. Here's what it takes. I'm going to move a little quicker here. What it takes to get significant EV penetration, just a snapshot for you. In Norway, you have about 100% tax on an internal combustion engine vehicle. You have, of course, plenty of incentives, and you have $6 gas. In China, you have subsidies that can amount between 40 to 60% of the sticker price, although some of those have been reduced lately. But even more perhaps potent, you can jump to the front of the line to get your car registered if it's an electric vehicle, whereas you may have to wait for many months or perhaps even more than a year to register your car if it's an internal combustion engine. So putting that aside for a moment, let's just talk quickly about President Biden. We're looking forward to working with President Biden. We're optimistic there could be some things that we could agree on, particularly our role as exporter. Mike Summers earlier, API, talked about this. We think making sure our markets are open in Mexico and Canada for refining and petrochemicals, particularly respectively, will be very important, and that some of the trade disruption that we saw in the previous administration was not helpful. We want to be sure to continue to express, as we've already talked about, our role in battling the pandemic and our role with our well-compensated, highly unionized workforce. So we're keeping an eye on the many executive orders that have come out. I found it very interesting that the New York Times editorialized that he should perhaps slow down a little bit on executive orders. That's unusual for the Times to go after a Democratic president so early in the term, but we're hopeful that he'll come to the table and work with both members of Congress to try to find real solutions to the problems that plague us. So I'll stop there, and if we have time, I'd love to answer any questions.
Great, Derrick. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was wonderful to hear about the long-term outlook and how your companies have adjusted and kind of pivoted to address the issues under the pandemic. Continuing that discussion, I want to see, will COVID PPE production inspire future innovation for petrochemical manufacturers, leading to more good jobs?
Absolutely. It certainly will. And of course, what we're most excited about, it's due in large part to the work of so many people on that have been on our panel, on these panels today, is we have such a good feedstock in natural gas available in the United States. It's affordable and able to be transported on pipelines. And we have the best ports in the world as well. So the United States is ready to be an exporter to the rest of the world without question. So we're able to be competitive. And part of that is also innovation. Our companies produce the basic building blocks, and then it moves further down the supply chain. But I have no doubt that with affordable feedstock produced by America's petrochemical manufacturers, that the rest of the plastics and petrochemical supply chain is going to be well positioned for the future.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. Since you brought up EVs, why is defining the year of the EV so elusive?
Well, I think you have a desire among some to see this. And there's a lot of folks who are able to point to true facts that sales for a while were really increasing exponentially. You have a desire among utilities, honestly, to broaden who they're able to sell their product to, which is certainly in accord with the American way. So you have a big group of folks who would like to see electrification of transportation, and then on the environmental side, there's a belief, I think personally, a misstated or an overstated belief that EVs are better for the environment. And actually, the internal combustion engine on a life cycle basis, when you look at the totality of environmental impacts, can compare quite favorably, particularly with hybrid technology, both on a greenhouse gas basis and when you look at the entire footprint from mining and production all the way to disposal. And so I think there's a push mainly for environmental reasons. And I think because of that, people want to see this happen. But the fact is, it's got to work for consumers. At the end of the day, American consumers have got to be comfortable with the technology. They're very comfortable with the internal combustion engine. It's been around for over 100 years now. Electric vehicles, believe it or not, were about a third of the fleet in the early 1900s, in the aughts, before the Model T came along, and the gasoline engine won out. It's more convenient. It packs that energy density that lets you drive for hundreds of miles and then refuel in a few minutes. So that convenience and that cost and that affordability angle are definitely advantages. And I think, certainly we would welcome competition in that space, but we're quite confident if we're allowed to continue to operate and provide for our neighbors and customers that we'll be able to continue to do that in an effective and affordable way.